leadership, which you mentioned, there appear to be two camps, one who may be pushing for negotiation, one preparing for direct war. Which side is gaining ground? What do you think the regime is after?
Considering the amount of sanctions the Islamic regime is under at the moment after the emergence of President Donald Trump and after the suffering they've endured over the 12-day war, the hardcore extremists would be pushing for war, but ones who think they can still fight with tooth, hard, and nail to keep this regime at and stay afloat in Iran, just to keep at least the people under the illusion that this regime might just stay a bit longer. So they're using all kinds of negotiations to say this is not going to go forward. You all know that the last word is the word of the Ayatollah, and what he says goes. And he's calling for war, therefore war will happen. As we have seen over the past 2 years, time and time again, unwarranted missiles coming from the sovereign country of Iran into sovereign country of Israel at the hands of the mullahs. This is not a war Iranian people want. This is not a war Israel deserves to have, and it needs to be ended. It has to be an end.
So you mentioned the people of Iran. Let's talk about them. What's happening inside Iran right now? What are the voices on the streets saying in regards to this?
Iranian people are asking for regime change. They are not interested in another war. But what they are also seeing is that every time Israel has aided, has aided them in standing against this regime, as we have witnessed over the past 2 years since the October 7 massacres, since the April 14th attacks from Iran into Israel, Israel's retaliation has given a strength and a point of hope to Iranian people that maybe this regime, after all of the atrocities that they have pulled on Iranian people, after the 45-year silence of the international community, at least Israel, in defense of itself, is defending Iranian people. And Iranian people do not want to have a war against Israel, but the Islamic regime has brought a war into our country. It has put Iranian people in danger. And unlike Israel, who is adamant on defending its people and is putting the infrastructure there for its people during a time of war, Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic's regime, is hoping to use Iranian civilians as its own shields just to make Israel look bad. However, we have seen over the past multiple attacks on the Islamic regime, the target for the Israelis have always been the regime allies, members, or the nuclear facilities or IRGC, not the Iranian civilians. Even if the civilians are being put at risk at the hands of the regime, the Israelis have proven to be on the side of Iranian people so far.
Now, there's constant discussion about Iran's nuclear program. How accurate would you say is the claim that President Trump's military actions severely degraded it? President Trump says they obliterated it. What do people think in Iran? Do you think?
Scientifically speaking, because of the radius around the country, we know that it was not the actual nuclear material that was touched. Which is a great thing for our planet and for the country we run and the countries surrounding. However, the nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Whether the material in that facility was there or moved, we don't know. That's all. I don't want to get into any conspiracies, but I do know that these have been damaged and the Islamic regime is suffering. But one thing that the Islamic regime does a lot of is lie on steroids.
So you believe that you believe this may be a lie, that they say that they still have capabilities?
I don't doubt that I don't think they have enough capabilities to cause damage to outside of Iran, let's say that. And this regime is not impartial when it comes to wanting to cause damage to Iranians, as we saw with the flights, the Ukrainian flight 575, I believe, or 573, where the IRGC shot military missiles at a passenger flight after the death of Qasem Soleimani. So in retaliation to their failures, who knows what this regime is capable of when it comes to hurting Iranian people and Iranian infrastructure.
Now, how do you believe that the US and Western allies, how should they respond to Iran, in your opinion? What should they be doing?
Honestly, I think considering the attack on the embassy in Mexico or the attempt on the attack for
Right.
the Israeli embassy in Mexico is enough to call in all of the ambassadors from the free world where Iran has embassies and call in and start having discussions. Also, we need to acknowledge the fact that this regime is a war criminal regime who doesn't care about international law or due process. What they do is what they want. We just have to be alert and we have to be on guard and we have to be prepared to protect ourselves and our nations. And I say this as an Iranian Westerner who knows the truth about this regime. All they do is uh, put out threats and I mean, we saw what happened in Aston Villa in Birmingham just a few days ago. The attacks of the Islamic regime is not just through military; it's also through social behavior. And this regime is happy and adamant that they have enough support in the sort of the minds of the everyday Westerner that they can pull off by saying such heavy statements. And that is enough to cause and incite fear in the Western countries and therefore into the hearts of their governments. But it's not enough. Empty words. The Islamic Republic has had empty word after empty word for 46 years. And the consequences of those words have meant complete isolation of Iranian people from the international community and atrocities on them. And then we saw the October 7th atrocities coming unfold and the proxy war that has rolled for over the past 3 years in the Middle East. I mean, there has to be an end to this soon. And the end of that would be with the end of the Ayatollah's regime. No other way out of it.
Now, we're currently catching you at a conference in Paris. Tell me about this conference.
So we have come together as a coalition of global women against the use of rape as a weapon of war, as we have witnessed the atrocities of Hamas over the October 7th massacres and the silence that fell on all of our ears through the international community and the international women's spaces. This is the second summit held and led by Elnet and a lot of incredible women from, I think, 21 women in the summer of 2024. We got together and came to the Knesset, and we also went to the places where atrocities had taken place. And these atrocities are true, they are factual, they have happened, and we are here to confirm that, raise awareness, and try and find a way to legally stop. Not that we can legally stop a crime from happening in such atrocious ways, but the accountability that follows through is what is important, and also supporting the victims, being the voice for the victims. So many of the victims are no longer alive, but the pattern of the atrocity is very much there and is testament to the truth of the atrocities and the murder that took place against those young and innocent women in the Nova Festival or in the kibbutzim or in Sudan or in Iran in the prisons where women are getting tortured to death. Literally, I mean, Iranian women are getting raped to death just as because their crime is a virgin, while they are prisoners of thought right before being hung in the morning. This is the crimes of the Islamic Republic. This is the crime of unspeakable atrocities that our world should not be having to bear. But here we are, and hopefully tomorrow would be a brighter day for all of us.
Now, you speak about the struggles of Iranian women. What can you tell me about this from a personal perspective?
I mean, During the Mahsa Amini uprising, when hundreds and thousands of Iranian men and women came to the streets of Iran to call out for justice and to call out the atrocities of this regime and to call out regime change, what the regime did in retaliation and response to the voice of truth and voice of justice was rape, torture, and murder. I also
Mhm.
want to let you know that it is good to remember we are in November. We are in the anniversary of Bloody November, where more than 3,000 Iranian men, women, and children were raped, mutilated, and murdered in the streets of Iran at the hands of this regime in a 3-day period, just over an uprising, the Aban Khunin, that is what we call it in Iran, the Bloody November,
Mhm.
where they they killed and they threw the dead bodies in the gutter. The very same thing happened in Israel in October 7th. The exact same behavior. That atrocity, that brutality has to be stopped. Those who take part in such atrocities and those who appease it have to be held accountable. And that is why we are here today.
Iranian activist Lily Mu, thank you very much for joining us, for your voice, for speaking up, and for sharing this input.
Thank you for having me today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And now moving on to a shakeup at the BBC. Two of the most senior figures at Britain's public broadcaster, Director General Tim Davie and the head of BBC News, Deborah Turnis, have resigned following accusations of political bias and editorial manipulation. The controversy centers on allegations that the BBC edited a speech by President Trump in a way that made it appear he was encouraging the January 6th Capitol riot, as well as criticism of the network's coverage of the Gaza war, of Israel's war with Hamas, minimizing Israeli suffering. We're now joined by Simon Plosker, editorial director at Honest Reporting. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So an internal standards advisor's report was leaked suggesting systemic failures in coverage, not just of Trump, but also of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. What do we learn about the BBC's editorial culture here?
Well, I think what we've learned is that there's a serious problem within the BBC, and I don't think that these two resignations, we can look at it as some sort of victory for someone like me. I must say, last night I was watching the TV, I was seeing the coverage, and it's huge in the UK because the BBC is the public broadcaster, is funded by the license fee payer, by British tax money, basically. So this is front page news, but is this going to be the start of a change? I'm not so sure, because I think what we have learned over the years, and I've been watching the BBC now for over 20 years as a media monitor for Honest Reporting, but also further back, as you can tell from my accent, I'm originally British. I grew up with the BBC. So we've seen plenty, but unfortunately, the issue really is that so many of the people inside the BBC have been captured by groupthink. They come from one particular political angle, which is left liberal. And when it comes to Israel, for example, we've seen over the years, and certainly within the last 2 years during this terrible war, the coverage from the BBC has been amongst some of the worst in the Western world. And I say the Western world because the BBC is important precisely because it has a global reach far beyond the shores of Britain itself.
Now, let's talk specifically about the Gaza coverage. Jewish and Israeli critics have long argued that the BBC applies double standards in reporting on Israel. Does this controversy strengthen that case? What are some examples we saw during the war that you can mention here?
So I think one of the examples that really springs to mind comes from near the beginning of the war. We had the Al Ahli hospital incident. If viewers will remember, a rocket supposedly hit the hospital, and the headlines blared that 500 people were dead. The hospital had been half wrecked, and then very, very quickly, in fact, we discovered that it was, in fact, an Islamic Jihad rocket, a misfired rocket that landed in the car park, and there were far, far fewer people killed and injured in that particular incident. But the BBC, one can remember, one of their correspondents, John Donaldson, was live on air and asked about this, and he said that it couldn't possibly be anything else other than an Israeli missile, an airstrike. And of course, he was proven wrong. And this was just the start of a number of terrible pieces of coverage. One can also mention that BBC has an Arabic station as well, where dozens of their journalists, so-called journalists, have been exposed for supporting the October 7th massacre, even going as far as support for Adolf Hitler. So there have been various corrections on that particular station as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been one thing after another. And even just a couple of months ago, one can remember as well, the Glastonbury Music Festival in the UK, where a punk band, Bob Vylan, was being screened live by the BBC and went on air shouting death, death to the IDF. And that was just after their lead singer had gone on an anti-Semitic rant against his former employer. So all these things have kind of added up now to a critical mass, and now we're seeing the results.
Now, here in Israel, I must say it's no news to us that the BBC covers Israel and the war impartially. There have even been sarcastic skits about this in popular Israeli entertainment shows. But it is far from being funny. It has had severe damage on public opinion. Can you elaborate on how these biases shaped public opinion when it comes to Israel?
Well, I think it's not necessarily the damage. I mean, it does do a lot of damage to Israel. And obviously, we are fighting on a multiple front war here. And one of those fronts is the media war. And the BBC has a very, very large influence on that. But I think certainly one of the biggest problems we've seen is not necessarily for Israel itself, but for diaspora Jewish communities, particularly the British Jewish community. And the rise in anti-Semitism, many people there are attributing to the coverage that we've seen in the British media, and particularly on the BBC. My own sister actually works for the Community Security Trust in the UK, which deals with obviously the security of the British Jewish community. And they've been witnessing terrible spikes in anti-Semitic incidents. And of course, that can also be seen in the horrific incidents in Manchester just a few weeks ago, which led to the death of 3 people at a synagogue on Yom Kippur. So what the BBC does has real world impact, not just on Israel, but also on Jewish communities around the world.
Absolutely. And this isn't the first time an internal report has dealt with BBC Israel coverage, is it?
That is correct. We have to go rewind the clock a long time, because back in 2004, an internal report was commissioned, and someone called Malcolm Bailen released this report. It was an internal report. We never ever saw what was in it. However, there was a reason for that. One can speculate that had the report cleared the BBC of any bias, it would have been out there in the public. But the BBC actually spent thousands and thousands of pounds of license fee payers' money attempting to keep this from going public, and they managed to succeed. And we don't know what's in that report, but one can probably guess that it was not very rosy for the BBC at all in terms of its coverage of Israel and the Middle East. Quite frankly, now it's been a long time since this report was written. I don't believe there's any point now in trying to get it released. It may just prove what we knew over many, many years. But now, of course, we've reached this stage where more current reporting has led to this particular moment.
And it took the Trump affair in order to finally push the BBC over the cliff.
It did. And, you know, this actually is quite disturbing to me, because we have to ask this question. How is it that after months and months, in fact, you know, at least 2 years worth of abysmal coverage and moments where the BBC has been called out and embarrassed for its coverage of the Gaza war, why is it that no one took that seriously enough to push the BBC over the edge? And why is it that only now, when this particular incident regarding the editing of a Donald Trump speech for a current affairs program, how is it that that is the thing that actually worked the magic here? In my mind, this is just another example of how Jews and Israel simply don't count. We've been gaslit over the BBC for a long time now. Those of us who've spent far too long sending in complaints, official complaints via the BBC's complaints department, will know what happens. If you get an email response, it comes back weeks or months later, and it is always incredibly defensive. The BBC will never, ever admit wrongdoing. They will do what they can to avoid owning up to any problems. And in this particular case now, the only reason they've owned up to anything is because an internal memo was leaked to the British media, in this particular case, the Daily Telegraph. And that has caused a critical mass here.
And you believe that these resignations are certainly not enough?
They're definitely not enough. There are people inside the BBC who we have been watching and monitoring for years, including their international editor, Jeremy Bowen, who has a long track record of anti-Israel bias. And these people are still in place. We don't know who is going to be replacing Deborah Turness as the CEO of the news department, but whoever it is going to have to clean house before we can have any sort of confidence that the coverage from the BBC is going to be anything other than horrendously biased and anti-Israel.
I understand. Well, thank you very much for this really important input. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. We're here every hour on the hour with the latest breaking developments, in-depth reports, and exclusive insights into the stories shaping the region and the world. Stay with us throughout the day for our next edition of ILTV on the Hour. We'll be here as events continue to unfold. Scan the QR code for our apps. Until then, I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you very much for watching, and stay safe.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Caleb Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. Hamas hands over the remains of Staff Sergeant Itai Chen, Colonel Asaf Hamami, Captain Omar Nutra, and Staff Sergeant Oz Daniel, all killed in action during the October 7th attack. That leaves the remains of 7 hostages Hamas has failed to return in violation of the Gaza ceasefire agreement. The IDF continues its airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in South Lebanon, eliminating Mohammed Ali Haddad, commander of the Radwan forces in the Nabatea area. At least 5 other Hezbollah operatives are taken out in strikes over the past few days, as Prime Minister Netanyahu warns that Hezbollah is trying to recover and rearm, and says that if the Lebanese government fails to disarm it, according to the ceasefire deal, Israel will act to defend itself. The Trump administration is reportedly pressing Israel to allow some 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding in tunnels under Gaza's Rafah city, an area controlled by the IDF, to move back across the so-called Yellow Line into Hamas-held territory. The Prime Minister's office said the terrorists will not be allowed safe passage under any circumstances. Military Advocate General Major Yifat Tomer Yerushalmi and former IDF Chief Prosecutor Colonel Matan Solomesh were arrested for leaking the video of Israeli guards allegedly abusing Palestinian prisoners at the State Taiman Detention Center and further offenses connected with covering up that act. Defense Minister Israel Katz appoints the ministry's former chief legal advisor Itai Ophir to replace Tomer Yerushalmi. Israel and India signed a memorandum of understanding to enhance defense cooperation that reportedly includes India buying rockets and air defense missiles developed by Israel Aerospace Industries for some $3.75 billion. And now our big story. The post-war planning for the future of Gaza is slowly taking shape, with the U.S. submitting to the UN Security Council members a draft resolution outlining steps for the creation of the new international force drawn from Arab and Muslim countries that is supposed to maintain security, oversee the disarming of Hamas, and demilitarize the Gaza Strip. Also, the training of a new Palestinian police force. Governance of Gaza will be overseen by the creation of the Board of Peace chaired by President Trump. But in the meantime, Hamas continues to violate the ceasefire terms, failing to return all the hostage remains as Palestinian terrorists engage in sporadic clashes with IDF troops. Here's Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking about the planned security arrangements for Gaza.
אנחנו מחליטים ואנחנו פועלים ככל שצריך להסיר סכנה מיידית לכוחותינו. אנחנו מחליטים ואנחנו פועלים. בסופו של יום, החמאס יפורק מנשקו ועזה תפורז. אם כוחות זרים יעשו זאת, מה טוב. ואם הם לא יעשו זאת, אנחנו נעשה זאת.
And joining us now for more is Jonathan Spyer. He's an author, journalist, and director of research at the Middle East Forum. Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Caleb.
Now, Jonathan, you recently wrote a piece for The Spectator about the Gaza peace plan as outlined by President Trump or the Trump administration having to coexist uneasily with the emergent reality in Gaza. How do you see the emergent reality taking shape in Gaza and how the peace plan is going to have to maybe adjust itself to that?
Yeah, well, I do think there are a number of really significant question marks remaining about the Trump 20 or 21-point plan. It was clear that both sides had an interest in the implementation of the first part of the plan that has now been implemented. Hamas had an interest because they wanted to avoid an IDF entry into Gaza City. And Israel, of course, had an interest because we wanted to get back the remaining 20 living hostages and eventually also the bodies of the murdered hostages. So that was clear, the common interest. Moving into the second and third phases, however, I think it's a much more complicated question because obviously the plan envisages the disarming of Hamas and it's giving up of its arms and it's giving up of its political role in Gaza. And Hamas has been absolutely clear from the outset that it has no intention of giving up either its weaponry or indeed its kind of de facto leadership role within Gaza. Now, the IDF, of course, has withdrawn from part of the Strip. Hamas now controls only around 47% of it. But inside that area, Hamas, on a daily basis, is reconstituting itself as the ruling authority. So how you get from that point, where we're currently located, to the point at which Hamas has been disarmed and has departed the Strip, I think remains deeply complex.
Well, clearly these are issues that have to be resolved. One of them is, of course, about this ISF, International Stabilization Force. We just saw Prime Minister Netanyahu say that if it fails to act, Israel will act. But is it really so simple? Because once you have foreign forces introduced into the Gaza Strip, that could place some limitations on the IDF's ability to react.
Oh, I have no doubt that if the International Stabilization Force does indeed come into existence and is then deployed, at least in the currently Hamas-controlled part of Gaza, it will certainly have implications for Israel's freedom of action. And it won't just be vis-a-vis Israel's relations with the countries in question, whether it's Azerbaijan or Indonesia or wherever it ends up being. It'll be with regard to Israel's vital relationship with the United States, because, of course, the United States will be signed off on this agreement. So they'll be very much committed to the success of it. So at that point, if Israel feels the need, I don't know, to engage in hot pursuit, into the area supposedly controlled by the International Stabilization Force, but in which the International Stabilization Force is not adequately dealing with the existing and continuing terror threat, then it's easy to imagine all kinds of scenarios. But I would want to add that, we need to think about these scenarios, but we also need, I think, to acknowledge that we really are in kind of terra incognita here. We're in new and undiscovered territory. The notion in the Gaza Strip of having international forces which are operating on the ground is a very, very new situation. We haven't really seen this before. Certainly, in fact, with regard to the Israeli conflict with the Palestinians specifically, this is a very new idea to have international forces actually deployed on the ground rather than engaged in training or advising, as we've seen in the past. So it's a new situation we're entering into.
Right, and we're talking about complications that may arise in a couple of months, but there are some already on the ground.
Yeah.
Jonathan, like take, for example, the story of we believe some 200 Hamas terrorists in territory apparently controlled by the IDF, hiding in tunnels. Latest on that is that Israel security officials are saying they want to see the return of some hostages, remains, including, for example, Hadar Golden, who's been here over a decade, his remains in the Gaza Strip before they allow it. There's pressure on the U.S. Again, these are issues you would imagine that perhaps should have been resolved before the IDF began to pull back from Gaza and have to be navigated and negotiated moving forward.
Well, I would add to that worrying picture the fact that these 200 terrorists still located behind the yellow line, as it's called, within the Israeli-controlled area, are not just sitting on their hands either. There's been, after all, let us remember, 3 IDF soldiers killed in that area in the recent days. So it means that, it's a very, very complex situation indeed. And in a way, it takes us back, I think, to your first question, because it's easier to see how this is already an example, in a way, of lines getting crossed. It's without a doubt that what Israel would like to do is to take very firm and decisive action against those 200 fighters, engage them, kill as many as possible, and the rest should leave the area. That's absolutely, clearly not what the United States wants, because that would lead to very, very great tensions or pressure on the agreement, even as it's just getting started. So absolutely right, this is a deeply complex situation. It's hard to predict exactly how it's going to end up. I would imagine that one way or another, it probably will end with the majority of those fighters departing the area into the Hamas-controlled zone. But it shows us, from the very outset, that there are deep contradictions in this whole process, and specifically the contradictions at the end of the day between the combatant sides themselves before you even get to the agendas of the international actors. Israel and Hamas remain in a state of war because Hamas wishes to continue on its long-term strategic goal leading to the eventual, as it wishes at least, the eventual destruction of the State of Israel. That's the strategic picture. Hamas hasn't abandoned that. The logic of it wishing to keep its arms is entirely in accordance with that ongoing desire, and Israel is entering into a process to try to quieten things down in Gaza. But at the end of the day, the conflict hasn't ended, is nowhere close to ending. There's no basis for it ending between Israel and Hamas. And we shouldn't be surprised, therefore, to see these kind of tactical complications on the ground emerging from that unresolved strategic picture.
And, of course, part of this plan is also, as I said, training new Palestinian police, bringing in Palestinian technocrats. But really, realistically, within Gaza, is there an alternative to be found to Hamas or even to some of the more radical elements in some of the other Palestinian factions there?
Well, the point is this. I mean, in the West Bank, of course, there is the Palestinian Authority backed up by Israeli forces, and this does manage to maintain more or less a livable day-to-day status quo.
Sometimes less, John.
Sometimes less, sometimes more. But what we have in Gaza is something entirely different. There is an existing de facto Hamas ruling authority, both political and military. And since the ceasefire, it is on a day-to-day basis getting stronger and reconstituting itself. So I think, to me, the key question of all this is, you really don't get to a board of peace and a new Palestinian police force and international force until somebody has taken that authority out of existence. Because that authority, the Hamas authority, doesn't wish to coexist with any of that stuff. It wishes to continue ruling itself. So the big unanswered question is who is going to take that work on? And if it's not going to be Israel, and apparently the international desire is for it not to be Israel, then who is it going to be? As long as that authority continues in existence, you're not going to get to implementation of the second or third phases of the current plan on the table.
Right, and the Trump administration especially is going to have to find an answer to that question quite soon. Jonathan, stay with us, because I do want to shift focus now from Gaza to the northern fronts that I know you know well, especially over the border in South Lebanon. Now, despite the ceasefire agreement reached last November, Hezbollah is not only also refusing to disarm, but is attempting to rearm and retrench itself in South Lebanon as the IDF carries out continual airstrikes on its operatives there. More on that in this report by our Devo Klein.
Defense Minister Israel Katz issued a statement accusing the president of Lebanon of dragging his feet. Katz said the Iranian-backed terror proxy is playing with fire and called on the Lebanese government to uphold its commitment to disarm Hezbollah and remove it from southern Lebanon. According to the U.S.-brokered ceasefire agreement, Hezbollah must fully disarm and its terror forces pushed back to above the Litani River, both of which have yet to be implemented by the Lebanese government and army. Katz reiterated that Israel will continue its policy of maximum enforcement and said this might even intensify, adding that Israel will not allow any threat to the residents of the north. And speaking this weekend at a conference in Manama, Bahrain, U.S. Special Envoy to Lebanon and Syria, Thomas Barrack, said on Saturday that despite the setbacks, Hezbollah still remains a major threat to the state of Israel. He questioned who really runs Lebanon, Hezbollah or the Lebanese government. This is what he had to say.
So what's the state? The state is Hezbollah. You go south, Hezbollah gives you water, gives you an education, gives you a stipend, has 40,000 soldiers. LAF, Lebanese Armed Forces, has 60,000 soldiers. The only problem is the Hezbollah soldiers make $2,200 a month. The LAF soldiers make $275 a month. The Hezbollah soldiers have 15,000, 20,000 rockets and missiles. The LAF soldiers are driving old Jeeps, some AK-47s. So which army is which? What's happening?
Jonathan, everything we said about Hamas disarming, applying even just as much or more so with Hezbollah. There is supposed to be a body that's supposed to take charge of that, the Lebanese army, but you've even heard the U.S. envoy to Lebanon casting doubt about that. Can the Lebanese army in any way really fulfill its mission of disarming Hezbollah?
Well, I think there are two aspects to this which we need to consider. One is the political aspect, and the other is the aspect which the envoy also referred to of the capacities and capabilities of Lebanese armed forces. With regard to the political aspect, yes, it's correct that since August, the Lebanese government is committed to a policy, formally committed to a policy of the complete disarmament of Hezbollah, not only south of the Litani, but also in Beirut, also in the Bekaa, throughout the country. But the fact is that it's becoming increasingly clear, and in a way should have been obvious from the beginning, the government has no intention of carrying out that policy, and the reason it doesn't is because the government, like all Lebanese elements, I think with the exception of Hezbollah and its supporters, has a deep fear or even horror at the prospect of renewed civil war in Lebanon, the kind that was seen between 1975 and 1990. So they're just, I think, not going to try and implement their own policy. Hezbollah have made clear, Sheikh Naim Qassem, the Hezbollah leader, has made clear that if they attempt to do so, there will be an armed response. And we know from previous events in 2008 and other times, when Hezbollah makes those kind of threats, it means them. Hezbollah's weakened, but it's still stronger, I think, than any other force within Lebanon that could put against it. The second aspect is the military one. It's very vital to remember the sectarian component of the Lebanese armed forces itself. Some estimates put the number of soldiers who are Shia Lebanese in the LAF as high as 50%. Even if it's lower than that, it means that LAF is simply not really a force you could rely on if you actually wanted to get into a shooting contest with Hezbollah. It would probably split and fall apart, which means the government doesn't have the political will to do so. But even if it did, it probably doesn't actually have an instrument with which it could effectively disarm Hezbollah.
Jonathan, some of the analysts and generals I've had in that spot over the past couple of weeks have said it's almost inevitable that Israel is going to have return to a full-out conflict with Hezbollah at some time in the future. Do you share that view?
Yeah, I think that's where the logic takes us, really. I mean, if we conclude that, you know, nothing inside Lebanon, no government, no Lebanese armed force is going to take Hezbollah down and take away its arms and its capacities, then you're left with kind of two possibilities, really. One is that Israel resigns itself to the continued rearmament and strengthening of Lebanese Hezbollah. And the other, as you said in your question, is that Israel takes action itself to prevent that. My sense is that Israel, in the post-October 7, 2023 period, is not going to be willing, no Israeli government could possibly be willing to allow Hezbollah to simply begin to rearm and rebuild its strength, which means you end up with the second option, Israeli action unilaterally to prevent that. Now, I would remind us all that that's actually been going on in any case ever since the November 2024 so-called ceasefire. Hundreds of Hezbollah men have been killed by Israeli drones and airstrikes. Even just this week in Nabatea, in Aitashab, Hezbollah men killed. So Israel is using the advantages it gained in the course of the war in 2024 to continue a very determined policy of preventing Hezbollah from rearming and rebuilding its strength. Having said that, the current level, I would say, of Israeli commitment and deployment will probably not be enough to prevent that rearming. So if Israel is indeed determined to prevent it, yeah, some kind of escalation is, I think, more or less built into the logic of the situation.
I want to turn from Lebanon to its neighbor Syria, which I know you have done extensive research, right there in Syria. We're talking about war with Lebanon. Is it possible we couldn't be talking about peace with Syria, Israel's historical antagonist there to the north?
Well, we are seeing, as you're aware, talks taking place now for months between the sides, between the Syrian Foreign Minister Shaibani running it on the Syrian side, and we're told Minister Ron Dermer on the Israeli side, and we're told that some progress has been made. My sense is that, however, this is not currently the key priority for either side, not for Israel and not for the new government in Syria. So they're talking, and the talks, we're told, are making progress or are not making progress. But my sense, at least, is that both countries, both governments, have a great deal more on their plate of much greater urgency right now. And for as long as there isn't sort of shooting going on along the border, I think both Israel and Syria, for now at least, can live more or less with the status quo. Israel has, of course, deployed across the border, and it's committed to the protection of the Druze community in Sweden.
Which is one of the complications towards reaching a peace agreement or even a official security arrangement with Syria right now.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think a full peace agreement to me is very hard to imagine, because I think it would be very hard for any Syrian government to formally cede its claimed sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Sure. And of course, that's not going to be ceded anytime soon by anybody in Jerusalem. So hard to imagine a complete peace agreement, sort of Egypt or Jordan style, but yet some kind of de facto security arrangement of one kind or another, I think is likely probably in the longer term, depending, of course, on the continued stability of the government in Damascus. And this is not something we should necessarily take for granted. Let us remember that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which has now taken power, getting on for a year in Damascus, still does not have control over the entirety of the country. Indeed, one of the reasons why Hezbollah and Iran are still able, as we are learning in recent days, are still able to bring weaponry across from Iraq, across Syria and into Lebanon, is because the government of Syria does not have full sovereignty over the entirety of that country's territory. So I think another kind of big question mark to do with all this, if one looks at Israeli-Syrian relations, is, how stable is the Sharar government? Is it likely to enjoy longevity? Might it not be all that stable? These are also, I think, considerations to add to the mix. After all, nobody should have any interest in making a peace agreement or even any kind of arrangement with a power that doesn't actually rule the entirety of its territory and might not even be around in the longer term.
Well, you mentioned President al-Shara. One of the big question marks is what are his real intentions?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people in Israel, a lot of security analysts and Syria experts question whether someone really could have moved so quickly from being a jihadist, from being sort of almost al-Qaeda figure, to becoming someone who's going to coexist with Israel in any way. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I tend to also be very sceptical. And I think with all these, one should be looking at what's happening practically on the ground. We're already a year into Sharar's government, so are there indicators of where he may be headed? And the answer is, if we look at what he's done, there's already been 3 cases now of very grave and large-scale sectarian bloodletting, twice against the Druze, once against the Alawis of the western coastal area, carried out at the hands of forces either directly or tangentially linked to the Damascus government. So Sharar is creating clearly an authoritarian government with himself at the top. It has a Sunni Islamist tinge to it. He is rebadging some of the most, actually, highness, I would say, of Sunni jihadi commanders of the civil war period as division commanders in the new Syrian army. So, yeah, I would not assume by any means that he has peaceful intentions in the longer term. In the shorter term, I think he has no choice but to have not peaceful, but at least stable intentions, because he's got too much on his plate inside of Syria, trying to consolidate himself, to have any thoughts about, aggression outside. But in the longer term, yes, this is a jihadi. This is somebody who just a decade and a half ago was sitting in an American jail in Iraq with his comrades from al-Qaeda. So we should certainly be taking that into account. All
right, Jonathan Spire, thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
Thanks, Khaled.
And now a final word. Famine, genocide, expulsion. These were words thrown around endlessly during Israel's war against Hamas, at street protests, in academic seminars, in editorial pieces, and in the halls of human rights organizations. But the truth is that while there may have been cases of malnutrition in Gaza, there was no hunger. While civilian casualties regrettably did take place, there was nothing even remotely like genocide. And despite the charges that Israel went to war to resettle Gaza, not one Palestinian was expelled from there. And the war ended, as Israel always said it would, with the return of the hostages. But there is a real genocide underway, real famine and real expulsion taking place now, not in Gaza, but in Sudan's brutal civil war, in the Darfur region, where hundreds of thousands of civilians are being killed by the rebel rapid security forces. The bloody killing fields so vast there that they are visible by satellite. A new report finds close to 500,000 people there are starving in the midst of a combat zone. And over 4 million Sudanese have had to flee the country, with 4 times that figure internally displaced. Numbers that dwarf what took place in Gaza. So where are the rallies in Western cities decrying the situation in Sudan? Where are the humanitarian rescue missions, the cries of celebrity activists, the mobilization of international groups and governments to stop the bloodshed in Sudan and the vast hardships that are being inflicted on its people? Could it be that because the Sudan civil war pits Muslims against Muslims, and Muslims of color at that, that so much of the world chooses to feel comfortable to ignore that conflict while continuing to focus on the supposed crimes of the world's only Jewish state and army? Now, Israel's battle against Hamas was a complicated, messy campaign, as brutal and heartbreaking as all wars must be, even necessary ones. And this country, this democracy, is still grappling with the war's fallout, as indicated by the latest affair around the alleged abuse at State Taymon prison and the scandal involving the IDF prosecutor's office connected with that. But the insightful hyperbole, the outright anti-Semitic invective directed against Israel and the IDF during the Gaza war and now beyond accomplished nothing. Not for the Palestinians of Gaza, not for those protesters and rights groups that screamed famine and genocide, not for those hypocritical governments that condemned Israel for sins far less than their own. The world cried an ocean of tears from Gaza. What a shame, then, that it seems to have run out of them when it comes to the far more immense human tragedy now unfolding in Sudan. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
The academic year is already in full swing, and Reichman University is welcoming a new class of international students from around the world. ILTV was at the orientation day at the Reichman campus to see it all unfold. Have a look.
Nearly 800 students from around the world began orientation week at Reichman University's Rafael Recanati International School. Students started the day by meeting their personal counselors in green shirts and their fellow classmates for the year ahead. The students then toured the campus before kicking off the orientation ceremony, where the students were greeted by head of the Rafael Recanati International School, Jonathan Davis, as well as Professor Boaz Ganor, president of Reichman University. Both shared inspiring words.
What we have going on here is 800 brand new students coming to Reichman University. They are part of the 2,400 students studying here from 90 different countries for full academic degrees, either BA or MA. And they stood up to be counted. And in spite of everything else that's going on in the world or in Israel, they stood up, came here, and they're about to begin their journey here in Israel.
After the opening ceremony, a massive corner filled with extracurricular clubs, activities, and opportunities was open to all of the fresh students. From creative workshops to sports, clubs, and so much more, the opportunities to expand beyond just learning was palpable. The Students' Fair was underway, but ILTV set out to settle a burning question. What compels a student to register for classes in a country that had not yet entered a ceasefire in the war?
For me, it was more about safety, like with all the fears that brought coming to Israel. Learning in the U.S. did not bring a sense of safety to me, so I was more compelled to come to a place where I feel a sense of community and safety all around me.
It's a great opportunity to study in English and finish your degree in Israel especially. And the best part about here, I think, is the culture. Because like such a different people are coming here from US, from Mexico. I met from Argentina also, and I'm from South Korea. I met from Hong Kong, and there's like a bunch of people, different cultures, and everyone's like integrating and becoming one and united.
I moved here 5 years ago to join the army originally. I came here as a lone soldier, and I finished the war as well. I finished Miluim, and I figured it was time to start life and start studying.
Like Gabriel, Noam Harouche served in the IDF. But Noam was severely injured in November of 2023 when his tank came under attack. His injuries led to the amputation of his leg. But today, with his prosthetic, Noam joins the international school at Reichman University to pursue his passions.
I want to make a difference. I want to do something big. I think I have the shlichut, as they say, to do something big. I think it's the right place. I am going into Mshal, so I'm hoping that I can find myself here and do whatever I can just to make the biggest difference that I can make here.
These students are coming from around the world and from different backgrounds, but they all have one thing in common.
Go with the flow. It's not too bad. It's as bad as people say, but it's really, really not. You meet friends for life, people for life, skills for life, and it definitely shapes and builds you into a better person.
Like I understand it can feel a little bit scary and intimidating, but everybody in Israel has a warm heart and there's a beautiful community here.
Come here, enjoy the Israeli culture, the Jewish culture. It's something that you wouldn't have any way to experience in anywhere else.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect, thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the last hour. I'm India Naftali, and here is your roundup of the latest developments across Israel and the region. Hadar Golden is finally back in Israel, more than a decade after his body was abducted to Gaza by Hamas. The fallen IDF lieutenant was killed on August 1st, 2014, during Operation Protective Edge, and his remains were held in the Strip for 11 years. In a full-circle moment, Hadar Golden's remains were received by his former unit members in the IDF, who carried his coffin upon its return to Israel. But now we learn that before his return, the United States had offered Hamas a deal. According to sources involved in the ceasefire talks, Washington proposed safe passage for about 200 terrorists still trapped in Rafah in exchange for Golden's body. His remains were returned before any agreement was finalized, after Hamas learned that the Israeli forces had already discovered the tunnel where he was being held. U.S. officials are reportedly still pressuring Israel to allow those terrorists safe exit from Rafah as part of the ongoing ceasefire talks, a move that Israel strongly opposes. Senior Israeli officials privately warned that if American pressure intensifies, Israel may have no choice but to compromise. Meanwhile, the Golden family spoke out after receiving Hadar's remains, saying the moment brought closure after 11 years of agony.
לפני 11 שנים ו3 חודשים עמדנו פה בחודש אוגוסט, אחרי שחטפו לנו את הדר, וצעקנו שאסור לעזוב את עזה בלי להשיב את הדר. והיה לנו מובן מאליו שמדינת ישראל לא תשאיר חיילים מאחור. לקח לנו 11 שנים להחזיר אותו בעזרת צה"ל וכוחות הביטחון.
And now, Iran could be planning to launch 2,000 missiles at Israel. Israeli and Western officials warn that Iran is preparing for a new round of conflict with Israel, even after the devastating war months ago. It's being reported that Tehran's missile factories are operating 24 hours a day, and intelligence indicates Iran now has enough enriched uranium to build more than 11 nuclear bombs. Israel believes Iran has moved much of its uranium stockpile to a secret site nicknamed Pickaxe Mountain. Ali Vaez of the International Crisis Group warned that in any future war, Iran aims to launch 2,000 missiles at once to overwhelm Israeli defenses, far more than the 500 fired during the June conflict. Israeli security officials called the last confrontation an unfinished job and said they are preparing for another war, which they see as only a matter of time. Will Israel and Saudi Arabia normalize relations? Well, as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman prepares to visit the White House, Riyadh is making its position clear: no normalization with Israel without a roadmap to Palestinian statehood. Despite President Trump's optimism about a new Abraham Accords breakthrough, Saudi officials say that the kingdom will not sign any agreement until it sees credible progress towards a sovereign Palestinian state. Analysts say the Crown Prince intends to press Trump for a clear American commitment to that goal during his meeting on November 18th. Formal ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia would mark a historic shift in regional alliances. But for now, the kingdom is signalizing it will wait. And finally, a major shakeup at Britain's BBC. A leaked internal report written by Michael Prescott, a former BBC editorial advisor, claims that BBC Arabic pushed Hamas lies and minimized Israeli suffering in its coverage of the war in Gaza. The report says the channel often aired claims against Israel without verifying them and repeated Hamas's statements without question, making its reporting appear one-sided. The document concluded that BBC's Arabic coverage makes Israel look like the aggressor, but the controversy is accompanied by another scandal. An investigation found that BBC had edited President Donald Trump's January 6 speech to make it seem as if he was inciting violence at the U.S. Capitol. In the wake of these revelations, both Director General Tim Davie and Head of News Deborah Turnus have resigned. These resignations have ignited a political firestorm over media credibility and impartiality at the British broadcaster. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. For more, catch us live every hour or download ILTV by scanning the app on the code. I'm India Naftali.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Caleb Ben David, and coming up in today's newscast. After 11 years, Hamas returns a body said to be IDF soldier Hadar Golden. The U.S. takes command from Israel of aid distribution in Gaza. Syrian President al-Shara meeting President Trump in the White House. After holding the remains of Lieutenant Hadar Golden for more than a decade, Hamas handed over what it says is his body to Israel, transferring his remains first to the Red Cross at 2 p.m. local time, after claiming that the remains were recovered from a tunnel in Gaza. More in this report. In 2014, Lieutenant Hadar Golden fell in battle in Gaza, and his body was seized by Hamas. For his family, which has campaigned ever since for his return, the agony of awaiting the recovery of his remains has seemingly finally come to an end. Hamas claimed over the weekend that they had uncovered Golden's body, releasing video footage of the recovery of several bodies from a tunnel under Rafah, which the terror group says was located in IDF-held territory. That announcement spurred a visit to the Golden family by IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir. The family then released a statement saying an entire country is waiting for Hadar to be returned to us. On Sunday morning, Hamas announced they would return Golden's remains at 2 p.m. local time. Golden's return has become tied to the fate of some 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding out in tunnels below Rafah in IDF-held territory. The U.S. is reportedly pressuring Israel to allow them safe passage back to the Hamas-held area of Gaza. Zamir is said to have recommended that this should only happen if Golden was first returned, but some Israeli ministers have opposed letting the Hamas terrorists walk free under any conditions. And the militant wing of Hamas has said the terrorists in the tunnels would not surrender themselves to the enemy under any conditions, and that the mediators would have to find another solution for the ceasefire to continue. So, for the time being, the issue of the trapped terrorists remains unresolved. But for the Golden family, the agony of awaiting Hadar's return is finally ending, giving them the closure they have so desperately fought for. Also on the hostage issue, after more than 2 years of heartbreak and uncertainty, the body of Lior Rudayev, one of the civil defense heroes from kibbutz Nir Yitzchak, has also been returned to Israel. ILTV's India Naftali has more. India, what can you tell us about the hostage update?
Yes, Kalev. Well, military representatives informed the family of 61-year-old Lior Rudayev early Saturday that his body had been returned to Israel. The transfer took place late Friday night when Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad handed over the remains to the Red Cross, which then delivered them to Israeli troops inside Gaza.
The IDF held a brief ceremony at the border, draping the casket holding Lior Rudayev's remains in an Israeli flag before escorting it to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute in Tel Aviv. There, the experts confirmed the identity of the remains. Lior Rudayev served as the deputy security coordinator at kibbutz Nir Yitzchak and was a longtime member of its civil defense squad. On the morning of October 7th, he was preparing for a motorcycle ride when he received an emergency call to defend the kibbutz. He fought alongside other local security members and was killed while battling terrorists trying to breach the community's fence. His body was taken into Gaza by Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists. Rudayev was posthumously promoted to warrant officer in reserves and is remembered as a man devoted to family, community, and service. For 4 decades, he volunteered as a security guard and ambulance driver. He was known in his kibbutz as the person who would always show up first to help. On Friday, Israel also laid to rest Captain Omer Nutra, the Israeli-American soldier who fell defending the border on October 7th. His funeral in Tel Aviv drew hundreds, including President Herzog and top Israeli and U.S. officials. Hadar Golden, a soldier who was killed and abducted by Hamas in the 2014 Gaza war, was brought back to Israel today. The additional fallen hostages still held in Gaza include Master Sergeant Ron Gvili, a police officer killed defending kibbutz Alumim, Meni Goddard, murdered alongside his wife in kibbutz Be'eri, Dror Or, whose children were already freed, and Sudtisak Rinthalak, a Thai farm worker killed in Be'eri.
The distribution of humanitarian aid in Gaza over the past 2 years has been a sensitive issue and a challenging one. Now it is the U.S. that will primarily be taking on that mission as its plans for a post-war Gaza begin to solidify. More in this report. The supply of humanitarian aid for Gaza's population during and after the war with Hamas has been a challenging and problematic task for Israel. And now it appears the authority for carrying out that mission is being transferred to the U.S. and the post-war infrastructure it is establishing in Gaza. The Washington Post reported this weekend that primary decision-making for distribution of Gaza aid has now been assumed by the U.S.-led Civil Military Coordination Center in Kiryat Gat, with Israel taking a secondary role. An Israeli official confirmed to Reuters this process is underway, but added that Israel remains involved in the supervision and monitoring of Gaza aid. Israel has long complained that aid distribution in Gaza by the UN and other international groups was compromised by cooperation with Hamas, which seized supplies for its own purposes. During the war, Israel tried to address the problem by first having the aid distributed by Kogat, the IDF branch that deals with the Palestinian civilian population, and later by setting up the joint U.S.-Israel-Gaza Humanitarian Fund, which was phased out as the war ended. Now the U.S. is taking on a more direct role in aid distribution, which may prove a daunting mission to provide sufficient food, medicine, and shelter for nearly 2 million Gazans as winter approaches. But it's another way that highlights that when it comes to the future of Gaza, it's now Washington and not Jerusalem that is in the driver's seat. President Trump will host Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara today at the White House. The first official visit ever by a Syrian leader to Washington in nearly 7 decades. Shara's visit comes just days after sanctions still in place against Syria, including the U.S. officially revoking Shara's status as a designated global terrorist, have been lifted. And in a short video posted this weekend by Syria's foreign minister, Shara is seen playing basketball this weekend in Washington with the top generals of U.S. Central Command in the Middle East, including the CENTCOM commander, General Brad Cooper. And now joining us for more is Professor Kobi Michael, senior researcher at the INSS and Mizgav Institute. Professor Michael, thanks for joining us. First of all, I want to get your reaction to the news of Hadar Goldin's return. Still to be confirmed, but if it's so, it's been a long wait.
Yes, indeed. We really hope that it is Hadar Goldin body, and it will be a sort of a closure that should have been long before. And this is, I hope, something that we have succeeded to achieve due to the commitment of Hamas to the framework of President Trump, to the so-called 20 Articles plan, and not as an agreement inside an agreement where we will have to release the 150 or 2,000 Hamas militants who are deep in the tunnels there in Rafah area and Khan Yunis area. I hope that the return of Hadar Goldin is a part of the obligation that Hamas still has. And we have to remember that we still have four dead hostages that Hamas holds.
Indeed. I want to get you also your reaction to this report. It was first in the Washington Post, but it's been sort of confirmed by Israeli officials that the U.S. has now taken the lead in deciding on aid distribution in Gaza. We'd expect that that's happened maybe at some point, but the issues this could raise over really who's calling the shots now in the Gaza Strip.
Look, this is part of the efforts that are done or conducted by the American administration in order to give the maximum, chance or probability to the realization of the plan peacefully. And I think that Israel has to encourage the American administration in doing that, because this is an Israeli interest. Israel has a very vital interest that this plan will succeed, that this plan will be implemented, and the preferable way is peacefully, because once this plan will be implemented, it means that all the objectives of the war that were declared by the government of the State of Israel are going to be realized by the realization of this plan. And if this plan will fail, it should fail because of Hamas, not because of Israel. And here Israel has to build its legitimization and close coordination relations with the American administration generally speaking, and with President Trump specifically, in order to enable Israel to resume the military fighting against Hamas in the western part of the Gaza Strip, in order to dismantle Hamas and to demilitarize the Gaza Strip.
Right.
And therefore, I think that we have to be sober and patient, and to understand that now it's the time of the American administration to play the game, and to hope that they will succeed in playing the game.
And finally, I want to ask you, Israel has been urging the U.S. to be more cautious in its approach to or embrace of President al-Shara of Syria. But here we see he's going to the White House. There's sanctions against him being lifted. And yes, he's playing basketball with CENTCOM commanders. What's your reaction?
I think that President Trump and the American administration both are very enthusiastic with regard to the future potential of President al-Shara and Syria as an American asset, and I think that they do believe that there is a potential to make a step further or forward with regard to the relations between Israel and Syria, and to bring Syria to be part of the Abraham Accord, and to use Syria as an asset against Hezbollah and against Iran. Therefore, they give him the chance, and they are trying to forgive, and to forget even many things that have been done by Shara and his fellows during the decade and more of civil war in Syria. I do hope that they are seeing the reality correctly, and they are not wrong in this regard, because if they are wrong, then it will be very embarrassing, and it will create a sort of a very chaotic situation, not only for the Americans, but mainly for the Israelis and for the Lebanese. So I hope that this will be a sort of a honey trap for President Shara as well, and it will enable the creation of new regional architecture.
All right, Professor Kobi Michael, thanks for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you for having me.
Turn up the volume. I am Chaim Bilos, Mayor of Modi'in and Chairman of the Federation of Local Authorities in Israel. It's time to join us in Modi'in, City of the Future. We are waiting to welcome you to our young, modern, innovative city with great schools and, of course, all the benefits. Hope you will make Aliyah soon and join our Olim community who are so happy to call Modi'in their home. Now is the time to make Aliyah. See you soon.
Israel is strong and growing. Now more than ever is the time to make Aliyah.
U.S. and Israeli officials revealed over the weekend that an Iranian plot to assassinate Israel's ambassador to Mexico was thwarted by Mexican authorities last summer. But Ambassador to Mexico, Einat Kranz-Neger, says she's not deterred. ILTV's Devil Klein has more.
Israeli ambassador to Mexico, Einat Kranz, says she will not be intimidated after Mexican authorities foiled an alleged Iranian plot to assassinate her, describing the revelation as, quote, deeply unsettling, but insisting she will continue her work as usual. In a report by Axios, U.S. and Israeli officials revealed the plot that was foiled last summer, an attack planned as a response to Israel's attacks on the regime. The ambassador said she had only partial knowledge of the threat before it became public. And the Iranian embassy in Mexico denied the allegations, calling them, quote, a great big lie. This as the heartbreaking 1 year marks to the murder of United Arab Emirates Chabad representative Rabbi Tzvi Kogan was murdered by IRGC at just 28 years old. Had the attack against Kranz been carried out, it would have been a string of assassinations taking place a year ago. After the plot had been revealed, Israel's ambassador to Mexico showed strength and resilience in the face of terror taken to the global stage. Kranz said she will continue to represent Israel, saying, quote, this won't stop me, she said. We have a job to do, and we'll keep doing it.
On December 8th, ILTV and Besheva are bringing one of Israel's most prestigious annual events, the Jerusalem Conference, to Miami. The conference will bring together leading figures from government, business, diplomacy, and Jewish organizations to address the most pressing issues facing Israel and the global Jewish community. More on this from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
Under the theme Stronger Together, the Jerusalem Conference in Miami will focus on strengthening the bond between Israel and the diaspora, exploring ways to deepen mutual understanding and solidarity during one of the most challenging periods in modern Jewish history. The December gathering will include high-level discussions on U.S.-Israel relations, the future of diaspora Jewry, and Israel's economic and national resilience in wartime. Senior U.S. and Israeli officials, including Ministers Yariv Levin, Amichai Shikli, and Miki Zohar, along with MK Simcha Rothman and Jerusalem Mayor Moshe Leon, are expected to take part. The event will also feature business leaders and philanthropists, including Simon Falek and his daughter Tila Falek, who are hosting the gala evening at Simon's Miami residence.
So we feel like we need to support Israel unconditionally, and that is what we try to do.
The main conference will take place at the Beth Moshe Synagogue, where the Jerusalem Award will be presented to individuals and organizations that have demonstrated exceptional commitment to the people and land of Israel throughout the past 2 years of war.
We see in the past years the shift of Jewish community. The centers are changing. It was New York in the past, and it's becoming Miami.
The shift, symbolic and geographic, reflects a new phase in global Jewish engagement, one in which Miami is emerging as a powerful hub for Israel advocacy and Jewish unity.
In the last 2 years, we learned that we must strengthen our connection, our solidarity. This event is part of this solidarity, part of this connection.
I think what we need to discuss is what we're seeing now in the far right. I see a deep challenge coming from actually neo-Nazis who are being normalized by very senior figures in the American conservative movement.
As the world grapples with rising anti-Semitism and the ongoing war against Hamas on multiple fronts, the Jerusalem Conference in Miami aims to send one clear message: that the Jewish people are and must remain stronger together.
At its milestone 25th anniversary gala, the Birthright Israel Foundation announced the launch of the Generations Campaign, a historic initiative to bring 200,000 Jewish young adults on transformative educational trips to Israel by the end of this decade and inspire a new era of Jewish pride, resilience, and leadership.
At its 25th anniversary gala last night, Birthright Israel Foundation announced its bold goal to raise $650 million and secure $250 million in legacy commitments to bring 200,000 Jewish young adults to Israel over the next 5 years. For decades, Birthright Israel has been at the forefront of strengthening Jewish identity and connection to the land of Israel through their various hands-on programs. With Birthright, young Jewish adults get the experience of connecting to their heritage by traveling and touring the Holy Land. But now, their mission is as important as ever. With rising anti-Semitism across college campuses in the U.S., the need to educate the young generation is as prevalent as ever before. Since October 7th, 2023, Birthright Israel has evolved in powerful new ways. Against all odds, in a time of war, despite flight cancellations and evacuations, it has continued to bring tens of thousands of Jewish young adults to Israel for transformative journeys of meaning and purpose. Through it all, Birthright Israel has grown, adapted, and found even greater meaning in its mission, proving that even in adversity, the power of Jewish connection grows stronger. Speaking at the gala, Birthright Israel Foundation President and CEO Elias Sarativsky said Birthright has strengthened Jewish organizations, helped build proud Jewish families, and created resilient, knowledgeable leaders, the kind our community needs at this historic moment. Finally, he added, "This is not a dream. It is the world Birthright Israel is creating. We need every Jewish person to join us in this effort, to stand together, invest together, and ensure that every young Jew feels proud, connected, and ready to lead."
Nefesh B'Nefesh, together with Israel's ministries of Aliyah and Integration, of Health, of the Negev Galilee and National Resilience, and the Jewish Agency for Israel, are back again with another MEDEX event, but this time in Australia. The wide range of services and opportunities featured at the MEDEX events highlight just how essential these gatherings are. ILTV's Devil Klein has more.
The MEDEX events are back and bigger than ever. This time it's the Jewish community of Australia taking center stage with the unique opportunity to connect and integrate into Israel's medical landscape. More than 100 physicians attended the MEDEX Australia events as Israel continues to expand its global initiative to recruit top medical talent.
The IMAP, the International Medical Aliyah Program, continues to grow and expand worldwide, and we're now in Australia. It is an honor to be part of this vital program and a privilege to meet such inspiring Olim.
Israel is facing a critical shortage of medical professionals, and the MEDEX events are helping to address that need. These gatherings offer physicians a streamlined, one-stop-shop experience, including credential recognition, job interviews with Israel's leading healthcare institutions, and guidance on grants, licensing, and relocation, all under one roof. The MEDEX events, an initiative of the International Medical Aliyah Program, offers a service unlike any other. And with the inauguration of the Australia MEDEX event, these opportunities are nothing short of revolutionary.
MEDEX has set up some interviews for me to be able to sit. I've been able to do my documents to get notarized. I've met with the Ministry of Health, so MEDEX has organized something that I can come to as a one-off stop, and I'll be ready to make Aliyah next year.
For some, MEDEX is more than just a networking opportunity. It also offers the chance to integrate into Israeli society.
The future for our children is Israel, and I also think that if you're going to integrate into Israeli society, you need to come over, you need to work in Hebrew, and I guess that's the only way you're really going to be able to improve your language enough to be able to fit in life.
Sometimes what sticks the most with the attendees at the event are the fast and efficient services that are usually a headache.
It's been incredibly practical. So just over there, there's 10, 15 different hospitals in Kupat Cholim that we've been able to meet with. So I've met with sort of 5 or 6 of them and gotten a sense of how they work and how I might be able to get a job there one day, and training and all that sort of thing. And I've got my degree with me here, and I'm in line to try and get it notarized as well, which just streamlines the process, which has been really great.
After multiple successful MEDEX events across North America and Europe, the IMAP program aims to expand even further, reaching even the farthest communities like the one down under. Israel's Minister of Aliyah and Integration, MK Ophir Sofer, said he expects the MEDEX events to grow rapidly across the globe. But it's not just the attending physicians that gain something from this event. The MEDEX event showcases another step in reinforcing national resilience, not only in security, but also in health.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, we'll see sunny skies alongside hot temperatures, seeing highs of 30 degrees Celsius or 85 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and our new live channel. You could also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Kalev Ben David. Be well. Thank you so much for watching.
You learn that freedom is a mindset, that you have to build the courage while dictators are trying to inject fear. There is Sergio Popovic, the Serbian activist. He wrote in his book that dictators don't want to kill everyone. They want everyone to be afraid of them. So it is the fear that they inject into the society.
Hi, and welcome to the ILTV podcast. I'm Ayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV, and we are so grateful to have back our viewers and our listeners. Now, I have a very special treat on today's podcast. In all the way from the United Kingdom, Pantea Modiri. She is a journalist and a documentary maker, originally from Iran. Welcome for being here.
Thank you, Ayan. It's such a pleasure to be here. Excited.
Yes, me too. All the way, from the UK, but really around the world. Now, Pantea, you've described yourself as someone who was born into a revolution that tried to silence an entire generation. Can you take us back to that moment? What was it like growing up in post-revolutionary Iran? And when did you first realize that you needed to get out of there?
Mm-hmm. I was little when Iran changed overnight. Even as a child, I could see the whole beauty vanish. The TV that was colorful was with elegant women, beautiful romantic nature, and romantic scenes suddenly turned into a angry turban man preaching fear, sitting literally at a graveyard. So it was indeed a shock. When the IRGC military raided our house and arrested my family, I realized that silence is deadly. And that was how we overcame actually those years. We left Iran actually a few years later when I was a little bit older.
And what year was that?
We left Iran in 1986.
Wow.
My parents couldn't live in Iran anymore, and I wrote a poem when I was at a primary school. The teacher came at our house and they said that I could bring them in real troubles if anyone else had seen that poem. For me, I started my career as a poet and as a dissident. And looking back, it was probably a very Persian career planning.
Unbelievable. Now, how did leaving Iran as such a young child end up influencing the way you view both the concept of freedom and belonging?
Mm-hmm. You learn that freedom is a mindset, that you have to build the courage while dictators are trying to inject fear. There is Sergio Popovic, the Serbian activist. He wrote in his book that dictators don't want to kill everyone. They want everyone to be afraid of them. So it is the fear that they inject into the society, and somehow you learn how to dance with that fear.
Wow. Now, you have said that you really carry these two worlds inside you, one of the loss and the exile from when you left Iran, and of course one of relentless curiosity that you still clearly as a journalist and documentary maker have today. How do these two things coexist? Inside you?
They dance. One holds the pain and the other one talks to it and asks questions about it. Fleeing Iran at age 12, I thought I was losing home. But empathy became my homeland, and curiosity made me fearless.
Wow. Now you're here in Israel. You've come on a mission with some other Iranian dissidents. And Israel and Iran are always and often pegged as enemies, certainly since the revolution and most recently with the big Iran-Israel war that nobody expected over the summer to play out the way that it did. What does it mean for you as an Iranian dissident to walk the streets of Jerusalem?
It is surreal and poetic. It is surreal because I have been brought up with the propaganda that Israel is the enemy. Yet here, I see a shared hope, a shared exile. It is very poetic in that sense, because it is what I feel in the streets when I have walked since yesterday. there is a kind of humanity, a love connection that we are sharing, maybe even more than any other nations.
Wow. You feel that the Iranian and the Israeli people are connected in some way? The people, not the governments.
Indeed. They are. There is something, there is history. Maybe that is the history that is in between us that makes us connected. But it is also because there is a shared hope and there is a shared exile. Well, the children of the Persia are meeting Israelis again, and that is quite extraordinary.
For sure. I mean, there used to be such a vibrant Jewish community in Iran, obviously, before everything changed. And many of those people live here today. So I'm sure that's very special in that sense as well. Talk to me a little bit about this turning point. I mean, you left as a child from Iran, and then you were a refugee. Today, you are, I don't know if I would call you a Zionist, but you're certainly somebody who's become a very good friend of the Jewish state. How did you go from one to the other, though? How did you make that leap?
Empathy, the exile made empathy my homeland. And although, of course, a lot of people criticize me, but most of them say, most of the people tell me that they wish they were in my feet as well, in my shoes. They could do this. So I have received a lot of, since yesterday that I've put pictures that I'm here, mostly they have said, oh my God, you can do what we love to do. You can say what we can't say. Please tell them that Iran is not the Islamic Republic that is clinging on us. So that's what I'm here to say. That's what I'm here to do. I want to share the Israeli culture with the Iranians who love Israelis, but they don't know anything about them.
Oh, well, then how come they love them?
That's something that is because of the human connection, maybe. Maybe because they are tired of the hate industry.
Yeah.
Iranians are very loving people.
Do you feel that the people will at some point have the power to rise up and overthrow their regime and let that love shine through?
Iranians are doing their best to see how they can do this without violence. They pressure life. Life is precious for Iranians. Although the Islamic Republic wants to propagate martyrdom, Iranians do value life. So they are trying to find a way to do this without any violence. And one of the things that I have learned, especially in the last few years, is that although journalism is very important, media is very important, but media has been quite monologue and not a dialogue, and it hasn't worked on human connections. And especially when you are mixing humor with the journalism, that can be a very powerful weapon, maybe even more powerful than bombs, than any other weapon. As Iranians are also very creative, and they love humor. They love to make ridicule of the power. So we need only a movement that breaks that fear in the people, the fear that the dictator has injected the society over the past 40 years. When that fear breaks, then the society will definitely stand and just get rid of the dictator.
And you mentioned the media, which obviously you've been working in media yourself for quite a long time, even at the BBC, at the Manato TV I read, and in some other very large places. And the power of the media to play a role in this is quite interesting. Do you feel that there is an ability for media potentially to help the people of Iran? And how do you feel in general, after answering that question, media can help in terms of maybe there's been a lot of misinformation lately, so is there a way it can shift to do a better job of bringing out the truth?
I think the media has so far, media is a little bit behind. They are only working on the news, which is again injecting fear into the society. Media has definitely an important role because it's connecting people. But what media could do more is working on the human connection, because eventually it's the humans who can change the world. So if we learn that we can connect to each other, we get to know each other, even that whole fear that the governments are actually pressing the whole society and keeping them calm, keeping them quiet. The only way to get this society rise again is by the media teaching them that we love each other, we love to know each other, and we are all humans. And when even the worst people cannot kill each other, cannot be against each other in a bad way if they know the story.
Do you think social media, I know you're very active on Instagram, for example, about 400,000 followers, if I remember correctly. So do you feel that those platforms might be able to do even a better job than the let's call it mainstream media today, given the lack of trust as you're describing in the media?
Mm-hmm. I think the social media is indeed it can do a lot. Also, the social media is also changing very fast. So I'm a bit cautious about saying that it can do a lot, because you never know, especially with the TikTok generation right now. But I think as long as we work on human connection and cultural diplomacy, then definitely, yes, social media can play an important role.
Now, in Iran itself, storytelling can be very dangerous.
Yes.
So
although they do, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you feel? I know, obviously, you're not living there anymore, but do you feel it must just take a lot of courage, I guess I would say, to be able to use your voice as an Iranian. What gives you that courage to stand up? Aren't you afraid?
Yes, I mean, me and fear have coffee together every morning. Yes, courage doesn't mean that when you have courage, it doesn't mean that you don't have any fear, but you don't let fear to make the final edit. Wow. I think curiosity has made me fearless. Because it taught me that we all have fears. Every morning when we wake up, we are dealing with several kind of fears. But it depends how we are talking to it, and whether we are letting the fear to make the decision for us or not.
When you're here in Israel, do you worry that something might happen to you as somebody who's spoken out so strongly against the Iranian regime?
I have, in the past 15 years that I have worked for the media, for the Persian diaspora media, I dealt with that daily, weekly. Wow. Not many, but definitely hate messages, stalkings, threats of all kinds. But as I said, you don't need to let the fear to rule your life. Eventually, you have to edit it and do the final cut, and make that your editorial policy.
Wow, you're a strong woman, a very strong woman. And you're here in Israel as part of actually Sharaka's Cyrus delegation. And that's, just to let our viewers know, is a group of Iranian expatriates promoting dialogue and peace that works also at the Claims Conference, educates about the Holocaust. Why did you say yes to joining this particular delegation?
Oh, because the history is walking. It's the history in motion. Yes, I definitely was excited to be part of the delegation and to come here because I think the public diplomacy is the front line.
Yeah.
And we as storytellers are the soldiers holding the lights.
And you plan to tell a lot of stories while you're here? Is that the goal, to be able to make videos and share information while you're in the country?
I definitely love to do this. This is my first day, and my people who follow my work expect that from me. Yes.
Wow. And this mission, as I mentioned, it's a visit to Yad Vashem, that's the Holocaust Museum. There's this big push about, fighting extremism, looking at trends in coexistence. What is it that you hope to get out of this mission when you're done?
Mm-hmm. Two things. First, to show the Israeli culture and to make the Iranians who are completely disconnected, apart from their heart and their love for Israel, but apart from that, they don't know anything about the Israeli culture. So first of all, I want to show that to my followers. And also, I want to show that dehumanization is universal and good leaders have empathy. And if there is a quote from Cyrus the Great that says, diversity in counsel and unity in purpose, I think we all want to move towards a better world, towards a more human world, towards a more tolerant world. So we need to get to know each other, and we need to know that we are basically in our heart, apart from any religion or any way of thinking, we are human to human love. We have the love connection.
What do you want to, I have to ask you, beyond all of these beautiful things, what do you want to do here? Like, where do you want to go? What do you want to eat?
I want to try every Israeli food that there is. I want to meet everyone. I love to take public transport to meet people and to see the everyday life and to share that, hopefully, with everyone in Iran who are expecting that, who wish to be in my shoes right now.
Amazing. And how long are you here for?
For a week.
Oh, wow, a whole week. So there's lots of falafel and shawarma to be had. That's great. Now, obviously, there are growing tensions still between Iran and Israel, and even there's fears right now of another direct conflict between the two countries. How do you process the potential for another Iran-Israel war? And when you love both the Iranian people and now it seems like the Jewish people so much?
Absolutely. This is a difficult question because I know that there is a kind of contradiction within every Iranian and maybe even in every Jewish people, I don't know yet, but definitely within every Iranian, that they want to get rid of the Islamic Republic in Iran. And they feel themselves powerless, and they would love any foreign help and intervention. Yeah. But no one wants war. No one wants human cost. So this is the dilemma. How? I think, given the last experience of the 12-day war, that Iranians didn't go on the street. They couldn't, basically, because the system was eventually in place, and they gave weapons to 16, 17-year-old boys to stand on the streets and hit everyone and just shoot everyone that they thought maybe they are pro-Israel attack. So in that sense, I think we have to, the Iranian society first have to break through that fear that there is right now, because the war is injecting another fear on top of that fear, and then nothing's happened. And I'm sure no foreign intervention can completely topple a government unless the people are cooperating. So I think that fear on top of fear probably doesn't work. First the Iranian creative people who are now doing civil disobedience, they have to find a way to break this fear in the society so that people have this free mindset, and they do the job themselves.
Do you think that if another war happens, it will be good for the Iranian people, or simply because it's war, it will be bad even if it helps to overthrow that regime?
When you talk to at least my followers and people who follow my work, they say we trust the Israeli government more than our own government.
Wow.
So we know that when they are targeting those people that they should target. But we all know that any war has, of course, civil casualties.
Yeah. It's very similar to what we've been going through here in a lot of ways, after Hamas attacked Israel, and Israel had to defend itself and attack back, and we lost over 900 soldiers, but with the idea that we would eventually get security back. But it was so difficult because, you couldn't fight enough because the hostages' lives were worth so much. And on the other hand, if you didn't fight, you couldn't get security back. And it sounds very similar when we think about a war between Israel and Iran. We need to stop a nuclear program. We want to overthrow a regime. But the people don't deserve to be involved in war. It's very difficult.
Yes. I think people have to find civil ways and humor, as Sergio Popovic, who did, the Serbian activist, did topple Milosevic. Milosevic was a brutal guy who was like any other dictator, not less. Something that European dictators are somehow softer. No, Milosevic was a brutal man, and the Serbians did topple him with humor and ridicule. Sometimes humor and journalism together can be the most powerful weapon.
Incredible. Now, many people forget that we do have these deep historical ties between Israel, between the Jews and the Persians, I should say, and they go all the way back to somebody we've mentioned a few times, which is Cyrus the Great. Do you think that his legacy can guide us in some way for the future?
I'm so happy that a lot of organizations are currently working on the Abraham Accord and now Cyrus Accord, because what Cyrus the Great has taught us is that ruling a country can be compassionate and with empathy. Sometimes people forget. They think that power has to be ruthless. They think that a good, powerful man is a ruthless man. But it is good to keep Cyrus the Great in mind.
Now, you've said before that your work explores how trauma can give birth to empathy, and we talked a lot about that at the beginning of this conversation. What role do you think that empathy plays in peace building between such divided ideologies?
Mm-hmm. I think empathy can have a longer effect and a more constructive eventually impact on a society. Although maybe on a short term it doesn't have any. It seems as if there is no result, but eventually in a long run, empathy will have a more sustainable and more enduring effect. So we need to practice it every day.
Now, you're a filmmaker, you're a journalist. How do you use that storytelling that you're doing beyond all of the mainstream stories that you have to tell in order to help to show the world the shared humanity that you're describing?
I produced a documentary called In the Eye of Freedom last year from the injured protesters who were shot in their eye or directly in their limb from a short distance during the Women Life Freedom movement in 2022. And it has been screened in a few countries, subtitled in English, and I would love to actually also have a screening in Israel, because it shows indeed the courage and the dream of the Iranian youth, which is like any other youth in the world. Mm-hmm. And you also see how this pain can be turned into a power. You can see this 17, 18, and 19-year-olds who became heroes, who started to do a protest, to become the leaders of the protests in their area, in their cities. And after the exile, most of them are in Germany because Germany was kind enough to give them refuge. But the exile broke them. So they had lost an eye, they had lost a limb, and they had, again, at this young age, experienced exile on their own. And then what I tried to show in that documentary is that we all have the same dreams eventually. The roots of what we want, the freedom that we want, is all of the same quality. So why don't we connect on a deeper level, or why are we only looking at the surface of what divides us?
So finally, as you mentioned, you have many, many followers, some of whom are probably secretly watching in Iran the work that you do and being inspired by you. If you could speak to these young Iranians there from Jerusalem, what would be the message that you want them to hear?
Mm-hmm. I want to tell them that freedom starts in your mindset, and live your free life as you are doing, many of them are doing, and make laughter your weapon. And I promise you, one day we will walk the bridge from Jerusalem to Tehran together.
Wow, it's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Maya.
And in a powerful show of international solidarity, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered for aid to be dispatched to Jamaica, the Caribbean island country that suffered Hurricane Melissa. This is the most powerful storm ever to hit the island country directly, and the first major hurricane to do so since 1988. With the devastation and damage caused by the hurricane, the Prime Minister's office said Monday that Netanyahu had dispatched a convoy of humanitarian and medical aid to Jamaica. Melissa, one of the strongest storms on record to make landfall in the Caribbean, began to dissipate on Friday after sowing devastation across much of Jamaica, cutting off communities in Cuba, drenching Haiti, and leaving at least 50 dead. U.S. forecaster AccuWeather estimated the $48 billion to $52 billion in damage and economic loss across the Western Caribbean. Needless to say that Israel has its own issues to deal with here in the Holy Land, but it is still committed to international solidarity and cooperation, a beautiful sight to see.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the last hour. I'm India Naftali, and here is your roundup of the latest developments across Israel and the region. Hadar Golden is finally back in Israel, more than a decade after his body was abducted to Gaza by Hamas. The fallen IDF lieutenant was killed on August 1st, 2014, during Operation Protective Edge, and his remains were held in the Strip for 11 years. In a full-circle moment, Hadar Golden's remains were received by his former unit members in the IDF, who carried his coffin upon its return to Israel. But now we learn that before his return, the United States had offered Hamas a deal. According to sources involved in the ceasefire talks, Washington proposed safe passage for about 200 terrorists still trapped in Rafah in exchange for Golden's body. His remains were returned before any agreement was finalized, after Hamas learned that the Israeli forces had already discovered the tunnel where he was being held. U.S. officials are reportedly still pressuring Israel to allow those terrorists safe exit from Rafah as part of the ongoing ceasefire talks, a move that Israel strongly opposes. Senior Israeli officials privately warned that if American pressure intensifies, Israel may have no choice but to compromise. Meanwhile, the Golden family spoke out after receiving Hadar's remains, saying the moment brought closure after 11 years of agony.
לפני 11 שנים ו3 חודשים עמדנו פה בחודש אוגוסט אחרי שחטפו לנו את הדר וצעקנו שאסור לעזוב את עזה בלי להשיב את הדר. והיה לנו מובן מאליו שמדינת ישראל לא תשאיר חיילים מאחור. לקח לנו 11 שנים להחזיר אותו בעזרת צה"ל וכוחות הביטחון.
And now, Iran could be planning to launch 2,000 missiles at Israel. Israeli and Western officials warn that Iran is preparing for a new round of conflict with Israel, even after the devastating war months ago. It's being reported that Tehran's missile factories are operating 24 hours a day, and intelligence indicates Iran now has enough enriched uranium to build more than 11 nuclear bombs. Israel believes Iran has moved much of its uranium stockpile to a secret site nicknamed Pickaxe Mountain. Ali Vaez of the International Crisis Group warned that in any future war, Iran aims to launch 2,000 missiles at once to overwhelm Israeli defenses, far more than the 500 fired during the June conflict. Israeli security officials called the last confrontation an unfinished job and said they are preparing for another war, which they see as only a matter of time. Will Israel and Saudi Arabia normalize relations? Well, as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman prepares to visit the White House, Riyadh is making its position clear: no normalization with Israel without a roadmap to Palestinian statehood. Despite President Trump's optimism about a new Abraham Accords breakthrough, Saudi officials say that the kingdom will not sign any agreement until it sees credible progress towards a sovereign Palestinian state. Analysts say the Crown Prince intends to press Trump for a clear American commitment to that goal during his meeting on November 18th. Formal ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia would mark a historic shift in regional alliances. But for now, the kingdom is signalizing it will wait. And finally, a major shakeup at Britain's BBC. A leaked internal report written by Michael Prescott, a former BBC editorial advisor, claims that BBC Arabic pushed Hamas lies and minimized Israeli suffering in its coverage of the war in Gaza. The report says the channel often aired claims against Israel without verifying them and repeated Hamas's statements without question, making its reporting appear one-sided. The document concluded that BBC's Arabic coverage makes Israel look like the aggressor, but the controversy is accompanied by another scandal. An investigation found that BBC had edited President Donald Trump's January 6 speech to make it seem as if he was inciting violence at the U.S. Capitol. In the wake of these revelations, both Director General Tim Davie and Head of News Deborah Turnus have resigned. These resignations have ignited a political firestorm over media credibility and impartiality at the British broadcaster. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. For more, catch us live every hour or download ILTV by scanning the app on the code. I'm India Naftali.
With the anti-Semitic socialist Zoran Mamdani headed for Gracie Mansion, is New York City finished? Or is his election as mayor the canary in the coal mine for American Jewry? Joining us in this JNS studio to discuss this disturbing development is Commentary Magazine editor-in-chief John Podhoretz, my brother and a veteran New Yorker, an expert in Big Apple politics. Tune in for an unforgettable episode of Israel Undiplomatic.
Shalom, I'm Mark Regev for a special edition of Israel Undiplomatic. Today we're going to devote the entire program to Zoran Mamdani's victory in New York and what it means for Israel, the Jewish world, and beyond. I suppose I should also say what it means for America, too. With me, as per usual, is my co-host, Ruthie Bloom. But we also have a very special guest. The first time in a year and a half of Israel Undiplomatic, we have a special guest, Ruthie's brother, John Podhoretz, who is the editor of Commentary Magazine in New York, perfectly positioned to share with us his wisdom on the Mamdani victory. But I want to tell you, John, before we get to the questions, that I personally have to tell you that me and my family have a relationship with Commentary Magazine going back to the 1960s. I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, which maybe for my parents was a bit of an intellectual desert. And every month, we'd get the printed edition of Commentary, and I remember it arriving, and we had stacks of them. They were never thrown out. They were kept, looked as intellectual resources. So what you do at Commentary was appreciated by my family way back then.
That's a great honor, and Commentary was then edited by Ruthie's and my father, Norman Podhoretz, and it was the heart of intellection in the Jewish world. It was designed, started in 1945 to explain America to the Jews and to explain Jews to America, but it quickly became, people have called it, I can't remember who, various people have called it the most important Jewish magazine ever published. Some ways the most important Jewish periodical ever published, and has covered Israel, Zionism, American Jewry, the sociology of American Jewry, the post-Holocaust Jewish world, theology after the Holocaust, Judaism after the Holocaust, and all kinds of other topics like American politics and American society. And it's a very unique publication, nothing like it. And go to commentary.org to find out more.
So now we've done the plug, I'm going to ask you a serious question.
Yes.
And then I'll let Ruthie get a word in. But look, I'm not a New Yorker. I don't care really about the price of buses in New York and how good the transit system is. I care about Israel. I care about America. And I want to share with you a thought. I was the ambassador of Israel in the United Kingdom from 2016 to 2020, which was the Corbyn years. Mm-hmm. And people talked about how Corbyn, as this radical leftist who also had a problem with Jews and was terribly anti-Israel, right? That he was the leader of what was once a mainstream party, and he took it to the radical left. And it was a problem. People talked about then at the time of the Corbynization, the possible Corbynization of the Democratic Party. Are we seeing in these New York results the Corbynization of the Democratic Party?
Yeah. I mean, it's not, this New York result comes after several years in which anti-Semitism has become a mainstream view within the Democratic Party. This is the true establishment of it, because this is the largest city in America. It's 8.5 million people. That would make it the 11th largest state in the union if it were considered a state. It's obviously the most important city in the United States, if not in the world entire, and was, just to give you a sense of where New York is now, 12% of the population in New York is Jewish. It is still the single largest Jewish population on earth. There are more Jews in New York than there are in Jerusalem or in Tel Aviv, like twice as many as in Tel Aviv, more than in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is obviously half non-Jewish. So New York is about 900,000 Jews. So it's the largest Jewish city. But 70 years ago, 75 years ago, New York was 31% Jewish. It is now 12% or 11% Jewish. So famously is a Jewish city. It's the city of Seinfeld. It's the city of Woody Allen. It's where the conservative Jewish movement began at the Jewish Theological Seminary, where I was bar mitzvahed and where my parents studied and met and where my father-in-law was a professor for many years, the most Jewish city on earth. And if you had told me 20 years ago that this result could be possible, that not only would someone who was plenty of non-Jewish mayors of New York, interestingly enough, the most famous legendary mayor of New York, Fiorello LaGuardia, who was the mayor during the Depression, one of the great secrets of his success was that he was halakhically Jewish. His mother was a Sephardic Jew with the last name of Pardo, and he played it. Like, he went around, Jews loved him the way ethnics loved him because he talked a little Yiddish, even though he was Sephardic, but he learned Yiddish. And so that was the sort of famous melting pot of New York, that you could have this half Italian, half Jewish mayor who was the great populist hero of the 1930s. And here we move, it's now almost 100 years later. Obviously, everything has changed. Jews moved out of New York. Jews moved to the suburbs. Jews moved to Florida. Jews spread out across the United States. But for a mayor of New York City to be someone who not only doesn't visit Israel on a solidarity mission after, not that he's mayor, but, obviously, Eric, I was on a plane in 1991 when the Scuds were flying. I came to Israel. Planes were empty. The plane was empty, and there were like 7 of us on the plane. It was me and the mayor, David Dinkins, and his entourage. And that was who was on the plane, on El Al from Kennedy. And Dinkins was no friend of the Jews. Dinkins actually allowed a pogrom to take place in Brooklyn later that year. But he knew he had to show the flag, meaning the Israeli flag, at least to hold his base of support. Every mayor has done this. Every mayor, even Bill de Blasio, who probably has views on Israel pretty similar to Mamdani's, nonetheless courted the Jewish vote, came to Israel, did all that. So now we have a mayor who is it will not denounce, famously won't say globalize the Intifada is something that should not be said, since of course globalizing the Intifada means mass murdering Jews across the world. Is not a supporter of Israel as a Jewish state, says he supports Israel as a state, and he says he is a believer in equal rights for everyone. So you can interpret that however it is you want to interpret it, what that means for Israel. It's wonderful to know that he's for equal rights for everyone. I'd love to see him make some statement about, say, Iran and Iraq and their treatment of the Kurds and Turkey's treatment of the Kurds, or the treatment of the Bedouin in Lebanon and Syria. That would be an example of maybe talking about equal rights for all people having the same rights in countries. But of course, this is very localized and focused on Israel. He came to political adulthood at college, at Bowdoin College in Maine, by creating a Students for Justice in Palestine chapter. His father, Mahmoud Mamdani, is a professor at Columbia University who is an Islamic anti-colonialist. And his mother, Mira Nair, a film director who made Salam Bombay and Mississippi Masala and a couple of other movies, was, I believe, the first major director to refuse to allow her films to be shown at the Jerusalem Film Festival. This would have been 14 years ago. So she is sort of an originator of BDS in the arts. So this is where he comes from. He marinated in the Students for Justice in Palestine, hatred of Israel, became an assemblyman in New York. But the question is, did he get elected because he talked about issues that really that people in New York really care about? Are his views on Israel something that he had to overcome, or something that were an accelerant to his success? And my great fear is that the latter is true and not the former, that the Mamdani secret sauce and he won 51% of the vote, is being anti-Israel, being a hater of Israel, being somebody, a politician in America saying he does not support Israel as a Jewish state is a very unusual thing. I mean, I think 5-6 years ago, there probably weren't but one or two serious politicians in the United States who would actually adopt that view. And now the mayor of the largest city in the country holds that view and is kosherring it.
Look, a lot of things that Mamdani has promised seem to be things that he has no authority to deliver on. You know, he has no authority over the transit system and whether he can freeze rents and all of those things he's promised. Nor can he does he probably have the authority to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu if he comes to New York, as Mamdani has threatened to do. But the fact that he'll say it and say it openly, that seems very worrisome. And was that his way of saying, no, it's not that I hate Jews or the Jewish state. It's only Netanyahu and his government because of what's going on in Gaza?
You'd think, but he had daily opportunities to say, I accept Israel's existence as a Jewish state. He ran for almost a year. Any day he could have said, I accept Israel's existence as a Jewish state. Not even support it, but I accept it. Wouldn't.
Can I ask a question here? Because, I mean, you still said that 12% of the population of New York is Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember in London when Corbyn took over the Labour Party, his biggest opponents were Jews in Labour who said that he's taken over our party. This isn't what Labour's all about. What is this guy who's got a problem with Jews and a huge problem with Israel? Why is he the leader? And they were the most vibrant supporters. And you could only find, Jews who would come out and support Corbyn from the really radical left. But he obviously got more than the radical left. He got, I think I saw something like 30% of the Jewish vote.
We don't know that yet. That's one.
Okay, but what does it say about American Jews that he could get such a high level of support?
I'm just going to say quickly, I'm not sure I trust that number. That's from one exit poll by CNN. The way to find out what the Jewish vote is in New York City, because my guess is that it's probably closer to, was 75% voted against him, is to do a precinct by precinct count where Jews live. And it's classic that exit polls like this have a margin of error problem.
Okay.
So I think the Jews of New York did better than that exit poll suggests. But who are the people who say they're Jews who voted for Mamdani? They are Jews who do not have for whom Israel is not either an important issue or for whom Israel is an important issue in the wrong way from how we think about it, who do want Israel to be punished, who do think that that the Netanyahu government is evil and think that Israel is a genocidal country. There are plenty of very left-wing Jews who believe that. And if they exist anywhere as an electoral population, they exist in New York City as part of this 900,000 Jewish population.
So now the question is, all right, forget about the Jews. What if there weren't that many Jews in New York? The question is, how is the greatest city in the world, and certainly in America, or one of its greatest cities, how could it allow anti-Semitism to seep in, to be open, and it's going to be in Gracie Mansion? I mean, we always say that anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine, right?
Yeah.
And that societies that embrace anti-Semitism are in decline. So if we leave off the Jewish question for a minute, it's horrible for New Yorkers anyway, right? I mean, Donald Trump is not Jewish, but he's a classic New Yorker, and he's horrified by this.
Right. Okay, Donald Trump is almost 80 years old. Zohar Mamdani is 33 or 34 years old. I can't remember which.
34, yeah.
Okay, so that's, the problem is I'm 64. Donald Trump is almost 80. Mamdani is 34. We're all in different generations. I remember the world of the 1970s. Like Trump remembers the world of the 1960s. Mamdani represents the world of people who live in New York, who have lived in New York for 15 years and know nothing about the history, about the Jewish history. They know Seinfeld and bagels, and that's it. So what does it mean that he gets elected as an anti-Semite? It means that anti-Semitism was koshered. The way for his path was cut for him by Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Bernie Sanders, the vanguard of these views in the United States, started laying the path, and he has now completed, I'm going to use this word again, the koshering of anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party, because not only is it that he has the views that he has, but he has now proven that they can be electorally successful in a place where there is opposition to him for his anti-Semitism, and it's the largest population in America that votes on these issues. And he nonetheless, it's a majority of the vote.
Can I say, for Israel, that's a huge problem because our national security is based a lot on our relationship with the United States. And we'd always used to, when I was an Israeli diplomat, you parrot that we have bipartisan support for Israel on both sides of the aisle in Washington, D.C. And what you're basically telling us is that's over. And we know historically, sometime in the next 10 years, there'll be a Democratic president. Yeah?
Sure.
And will he be an anti-Israel president?
Yes. I mean, it's more likely that he will be an anti-Israel president or she than he or she will not. I mean, imagine Kamala Harris winning in 2024 instead of Donald Trump. Do you think 2025 would have gone the way that it has gone? And she was part of an administration that was better on Israel than I anticipated, based on the fact that Biden had been Obama's vice president, Obama, the worst president on Israel in the history of the United States, the most unfriendly, the most policy threatening, with the Iran deal and then allowing the vote against Israel at the UN. Biden, somehow the first 3 months of the war, Biden did not fail us. Things got more complicated, but Kamala Harris was clearly moving in the other direction and as president, would not have.
So this has huge significances for Israel's national security. Because if you look at the crisis we're just coming out of, hopefully, the war, right? Without American support for Israel, we would be in a very tough place. And what you're telling me as an Israeli is that that is not something that I can count on in the medium term. Because Trump will finish his term in 3.5 years. No one knows who's going to be elected after him.
Yeah, it's worse than that, because there is a fight going on in the Republican Party, and the vice president of the United States and the putative possible frontrunner in 2028 is not showing many signs of being kindly disposed toward Israel or as a Jewish state. Refers to his trip to East Jerusalem to go on the Pilgrim's Walk into the old city as a thrill for him, because he went where Jesus had walked. Very, very pointed message. Went to the Holy Church of the Sepulchre, did not go to the Western Wall. Many signals being sent by J.D. Vance that he would wish on his own to maybe take the Republican presidency in a different direction. So this is an 8-alarm fire. This is no joke. And people need to understand. I don't know. I don't have a solution to this problem. My only solution to this problem is for Israel to prevail and for the world to understand that Israel won this war and is the leading power in the Middle East, because Americans like winners. They really do. And I think part of the reason that things have happened this way over the last 2.5 years was that October 7th, for the first time, made it appear to people as though Israel was on the back foot and might be defeatable, and at that moment, all of the cockroaches came out of the woodwork, and all of the Pandora's box was opened of combining classic anti-Semitism, newfangled anti-Semitism, all this in one stew pot. And so, what Israel can do is show the world that it faced down this enemy, beat it, is restructuring, will play a part in restructuring the Middle East for the better, and then we'll see how that works.
Well, it's also ironic. We talk about this a lot, and you've also mentioned it. How funny it is that that the Israeli left has suddenly developed this love affair with Donald Trump, And why is that particularly funny? It's funny because we know the left hates Donald Trump, and the left in Israel has used that as an excuse to bash Netanyahu even more, as though only Trump cared about the hostages, only Trump cared about the war, and that's as opposed to Netanyahu, and Trump saved us. But what's really sad about it is those same people are the ones who said that Netanyahu caused a rift in America between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, which is total nonsense. I've said that to you again and again. That rift was not caused by Israel. That was caused by the Democrats going more radical. But today, as you said, the trouble is in the Republican Party, there's those seeds of the Tucker Carlson wing. And J.D. Vance hasn't quite come out openly with that, but he's showing signs. So what more Israelis, I think, need to realize is that we have to support Republicans of the Marco Rubio variety more. And so do American Jews. They have to, I would say, my advice to them is, okay, stop pretending that the Democratic Party is friendly to you and focus on the...
But here's the problem. So the problem is that this fight in America, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, if people are here paying attention to this.
Yes, they are.
I don't know, but and you're saying Rubio over all this. Couldn't come at a worse time for people like you and people like me who would say American Jews and Jews have got to wake up and understand that, like British Jews, the Labour Party was no home for them anymore. And British Jewry is very small. I mean, it's tiny. It's 250,000 people or something like that. So its effect, electoral effect, is of course negligible. But it was a population that flipped from 70% support for Labour to 70% support for the Tories. And the thing is that something like that could happen in America. But this Carlson, Fuentes, Vance,